Okay. All right. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's masterclass on coaching teams for success. Now, this learning event is hosted by the ICF Bengaluru chapter and our team and group coaching community of practice. My name is Rachel Goja. I'm the Vice President for the ICF Bengaluru chapter and the lead for the team and group coaching community of practice. And before I introduce our wonderful guest speaker for today, let me first get a couple of housekeeping things out of the way. So please note that this session offers you 1.5 CCUs that you can use towards your credentialing or credential renewal with ICF. To get the CCUs, however, you will need to attend the complete session. And my request to you would be to please ensure that your Zoom display name is exactly as you would like to appear on the CCU certificate. Also, we would request you all to keep your cameras on as this is an interactive session. So we would like to see all of you. So unless there's a pressing need, please do keep your cameras on. And with that, I am excited to introduce our wonderful guest for today, Linda Berlot. Linda is an entrepreneur, executive, and certified team coach. She holds a PCC and ORSCC. She is the founder and CEO of Berlot Group, an ICF accredited coach training organization that is licensed to deliver team coaching and coach training programs to leaders and executive teams throughout the GCC. She coaches multicultural teams internationally in the field of change management and team dynamics. In the last 13 years, she has focused on bringing her experience to her clients by working with companies and in particular with their executive leadership teams so that they may leverage the strength of the relationships and dynamics between them so they get on track and stay on track in fast-moving, always changing environments. So Linda, a very warm welcome to you and over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I am thrilled to be here and spend the next 90 minutes with you. It's always wonderful for us from Berlot Group, and there are 3 of us here on the call, and I see a few other familiar faces. It's always a thrill for us to make new friends and for us to spend time together so that we can learn from each other. So thank you very much for having me speak about a topic that is very, very close to my heart. I live, eat, sleep, dream team coaching. It is my bliss and my passion. And I'm hoping that I can infuse you with the same passion when I show you why I am so passionate about it. If we have time, one of our clients created, they are a bank, so they attached ROI to their results. And I'd love to share that with you to kind of, I don't know, to try and influence you in the joys of team coaching. I'm pretty sure you're here because there's an interest, and so I know there won't be a need for much influencing. I have some slides, but I would very much like this to be an interactive session. I will be showing the slides and also not, because I would like for us to ask questions, answer questions as we go along. That makes it feel a lot more informal for me, and I like that type of setting. So thank you for being here. Thank you for honoring us with your presence for the next 90 minutes and for keeping your videos on. I really, really appreciate that. I'm going to share my presentation now. Do you all see that? Oops. Do you see it?
Yes, we do.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okie doke. So thank you so much for your lovely introduction. I appreciate you doing that. So that was about me. Berlot Group does 2 things. We coach leadership teams across organizations, across sectors and industries, mainly on their team dynamics. And we run a coach training school, which teaches people to be team coaches or systems coaches such as ourselves. And we do this throughout the GCC, and we've done this in India too. So the model that we use is ORSC, and these are some of the clients that we work with. I don't know if you recognize some of them. we've been coaching here for a long time, and we feel very privileged to have coached these many teams and many, many more. Very often when teams come to us, there are reasons why they come to us, and they're not always negative reasons. Sometimes they come to us because they're new and they would like to move more consciously and intentionally through the forming and storming stage of team development. But other times they are high performing, but they don't know why. And so they would like to figure that piece out with us. And sometimes they come because of diversity issues, change related issues. Sometimes cultural issues pop up in multicultural teams. All of these are present, but communication, conflict, lack of alignment, sometimes silos. And when these issues occur in the teams that we work with, it prevents them from being as high performing as they would like to be. All good? Mm-hmm. So it would be good at this stage to just share with you. You'll hear me speak about 3 words, and I mean the same thing. So team, well, a team is a group of people who come together to produce something, right? We're there to be productive. A system, and the system that we're referring to is an interdependent human system. And then relationship. Whenever 2 people or more make eye contact or come together to work together or to be in relationship, generally something is generated. Marita, one of our founders, Marita Fridjorn, she says, whenever the 2 people meet, something is generated, either a baby or a project or something in between. So for us, the definition of a system is a group of interdependent entities with a common focus or a common goal. And it's important for us that we remember this, because when we come together to coach a team for success, it's important to understand who is the team. The team generally is determined by structure, or when it comes to team coaching, it's very often determined by the goal and the objective that the team would like to achieve, right? We believe poorly performing teams can become effective, but good teams can become great. And that's very often when we get called in to work with them. So for us, systems coaching, because it's not just team coaching, it's also pairs and groups and couples and families. So systems coaching is an intervention that involves coaching intact teams. So we coach the system as a whole rather than coaching the individuals in the system. And what we are hoping to achieve is that they, as a system, can hold themselves and each other accountable to achieve the goals that they would like to achieve. The model that we use, and some of you might know this already, I am sure, is called ORSC. It is a mouthful, I know. It stands for Organization and Relationship Systems Coaching. It was created by Marita Fridjorn and Faith Fuller. And it was the first coaching model, systems coaching model, to be accredited by the ICF. Now, as we know, there are many, many others. And what's unique about this model is the relationship systems intelligence that we coach. And we will explain that. Really, what this is we help our clients be conscious and intentional about the relationships that they have between them, because we believe that when we focus on the relationships or the dynamics between us and we help them smoothen, that's when performance can really excel. When the dynamics between us are sticky or challenging or conflicting, that's when performance can come to a grinding halt. So I'd like to just stop sharing for a moment. So how many of you coach teams or work with groups and teams? If you wouldn't mind putting your hands up. So some of you do, yes. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So you know that you can have a group of very, very smart individuals, but they may not yet be a high-performing team, right? So sometimes that is because they just haven't gelled yet. They haven't created alignment. And other times, maybe they've been working for a while, but there's a lot of conflict, or there are things that prevent them from coming together smoothly. And what we know is that if we focus on the dynamics between them, they will become more high-performing than what they are. Think about it. If you and I are working together and we like working with each other, we like each other, there's a good feeling between us, we trust each other, we collaborate well. When there is conflict, you know, it doesn't hurt us. We can stay in the conflict and then work through to the other end. When teams can do that and then find alignment, they become high performing. And there's a lot of data to substantiate that positivity equals productivity. So how does that sound when I say that? How's that landing with you? Are there any thoughts, any questions so far?
Makes sense. We understand it, Linda.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
So, Linda, I do have a question, and I don't know if this is something that you'll cover as we go along. So, I know that there's, so couple of things, that two models that I've got trained on is, Peter Hawkins' systemic team coaching, and then what David Clutterberg talks about peril, right? So how different is ORSC from, because it is also talking about, and I know teams are always about systems, so so how different is this model?
They're very different models, and they are complementary. In my opinion, they are very different because we literally focus on the dynamics between the individuals.
Right.
And they focus on the team as an entity and all the other departments as interdependent entities.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And so I think it's not either or. They are integrated and complementary.
Okay, great.
So when we talk about we're talking about the dynamics between us. Imagine that all of us have a piece of string. Imagine that you are each holding a piece of string, and that we connect the string together to make a web, like a spider's web, right? So we all know that if we pull too hard, the web will not happen. It turns into a knot. So there is a moment where we have to figure out what is the tension, how, and of course there will be those people that are very active, those people that are less, focusing on the web and figuring out, okay, now my colleagues are active, I just need to stand still. Or now no one's moving, let me step in and help. And thinking, okay, well, they're pulling, so let me let go a little. The focusing on the web and the responding to what is required to create the web is the same as what we mean when we say we focus on the dynamics between the individuals in the team or the system, right? We focus on the relationship between them, because if we focus on that piece, the rest should all fall in place. We believe that a team is naturally creative and generative and intelligent. We don't need to have the answers for it. The team might not know that. And so if we can help them come up with that intelligence by helping them connect better as individuals, they will become high performing. Now, why is it necessary in this day and age to, number one, to coach teams, but also to take a systemic model or a systemic approach to coaching teams? If you think about the old leadership models, or think about the times your parents were in a job, it was, our parents were in jobs for 10, 20, 30 years, and that was seen as positive, right? But in those days, people lived in the same town or the same city for all of their lives. They didn't really travel. think about the world now, where the millennials and the generation that are coming up underneath, they expect global placements when they come into the workplace. Now, all of a sudden, we have teams. Now, all of a sudden, we have teams that are spread across regions, across time zones, and the leader is no more able to lead from the front. Change is happening so fast, it's impossible in this day and age to lead from the front as we used to do. In the olden days, the leader was the expert, the knowledge fountain. In today's age, it's impossible. That is impossible. So leaders are having to lead in very different ways. No longer can we lead from the front. No longer can we hope to be in the front of change, right? So what do? We have to tap into the wisdom that lives in the system. And that is what we call relationship systems intelligence. The awareness that as a system, we are more intelligent. The sum of us is more intelligent than any one of us, right? Let's look at that. So now it's more important than ever to move away from me, my leadership style, my work, or you, your work. All of a sudden now we're having to focus on the we. We're having to focus on the we, and the we is what? It's the team or the relationship or the family. And if we focus on the we start to understand that it has an entity of its own. Every system is unique and has an entity of its own. Think about your favorite band. Think about your favorite band. A few years ago, I used to say, remember the Beatles? And now people say to me, who are the Beatles? So I say, you think about your favorite band. And now think about another band and a third band. They all have, when you think about them as an entirety, they all have band members, which are individuals. And together they create the entity, which is the band. Each band has an identity of its own, and everything that the players do or don't do is in service of the band. For example, they have to come together and practice. They have to come together and make music that they record. They have to perhaps go on, when they travel the world and they go and they set up concerts, right? So that ticket sales and all of that. No matter how the individuals in the system are feeling, they still have to show up for the sake of the band. And that is because there's an awareness that there is something bigger than me and you. There is the band, which is the it. Now, couples understand this. Couples understand that in a marriage, for example, there's me and you. And of course, my needs have to be met. Your needs have to be met. But no matter how upset we are or how frustrated we are with each other, there's a relationship. And that relationship still needs to be nurtured. Every time we have a fight, the relationship doesn't end. Well, sometimes it does. But generally speaking, if we're together for a long time, every time we have a fight, the relationship doesn't end. The relationship is the overarching entity. And so we know that when we fight, we can't go below the belt. It's not all out war. We still have to cook for each other. We still have to be nice to each other if we want the relationship to survive. We understand that in relationships, it is exactly the same in teams, right? It's exactly the same in teams. When team members can see that there is an entity bigger than the individuals, then they start to work towards something that is more uniting, right? It's more uniting. And when we focus on the system, we start to see that the system has an intelligence of its own. And the intelligence that lives in the system is bigger than any one of us put together. How's that landing? How's that resonating? Feel free to ask me any questions as we go along.
It does resonate because, if you see even sports teams, right? You talked about musicians. Even you see sports teams, you see a soccer match, there are 12 people playing on a team, 11 people playing on a team, all having different strengths and competencies. But all of them have to come together, synchronized to perform and then succeed. So it cannot be just me, it has to be we and then the entirety of the 11, 24.
Exactly. Exactly. And we've seen, right, sometimes these football clubs, they hire the greatest players on earth. And because every player is the greatest player on earth, very often that team is not necessarily a high-performing team, right? They have to let go of certain things and then come together for them to win championships. Absolutely, you've got it. So all the work that we do is to build the 3 intelligences in the teams that we work with. So the first intelligence is emotional intelligence. We all know what that is. I trust that you do too. It's the awareness that I have of myself, my emotions. Social intelligence is the awareness I have of you. Can I see the impact I'm having on you? But also, can I empathize with what you are feeling, right? And some people are better at one than the other. Now, what ORSC brings, or the ORSC coaching model brings to the table, is relationship systems intelligence. And the relationship systems intelligence is the ability for us as individuals to see that we are individuals, but we also belong to a wider system. And everything we do or don't do impacts that system. Imagine that all of us on this call are a puzzle piece, and that each one of us is one puzzle piece, and together we create a beautiful picture, right? Now, my puzzle piece belongs to me. It's unique and individual, and it belongs to me, and yours does to you. If I scribble on my puzzle piece, yes, I'm changing my puzzle piece, but also I'm changing the entire picture, right? Everything I do or don't do impacts the system. Now, teams don't necessarily remember that. Sometimes you ask teams and they say, no, we're not fighting. I'm just getting on with my stuff. I don't pay attention to any of that. I'm just working over here. But they're not communicating to the person over there. So you start to see silos emerge. And a team which is siloed cannot be high performing, right? Because there isn't this integrated approach. So when we're working with teams, we're wanting to encourage all 3 of these intelligences. Take a moment to read that. What does it mean?
Essence, sum is greater than the parts.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
I was saying
when the members harmonize in their approach to the common objective, the effect is extremely powerful, and they are all synchronized in their working.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Sunita.
Yeah, I would interpret it slightly differently. Each individual by itself has a unique skill and talent.
Yeah.
And when each individual talent and skill contribute to the total good or the goal or achievement, that becomes an effective team. So it's diversity and inclusion of that diverse talent, diverse mindset is also important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you are all right. It is about leveraging the diversity. It's about checking in and listening to everybody. The smartest leaders who are systemic leaders, while they might be the hierarchical leader, they will check in with everybody and listen to everybody's opinion on a topic, because we are also unique and we look at issues from very different perspectives. There's a great book called Multipliers. Do you know it? Yeah? Liz Wiseman. I don't know where my chat has gone. Multipliers. Yeah, there we go. And Liz Wiseman says that as leaders, sometimes we are accidental diminishers. What that means is very often the leader is the subject matter specialist, and I have all the answers. My experience determines how the team works. So I tell my team members what to do, how to do it, and there's very little creativity, right? And in that way, I diminish the intelligence that exists in the team. A multiplier is a leader that might have all the answers, but before giving their answers, they will ask powerful questions of their team so that their team can come up with answers. And the team gets used to thinking for themselves. And in that way, they expand the intelligence in the system. What are your thoughts around that?
So that is how you enable people to do the best.
Yes, it's true, right? That's how you enable people. And it's also how you get people to buy in. So it's very difficult to resist a change that I've been part of the conversations, even though you might not adopt my opinion or my suggestion. It's hard for me to resist if I've been part of that conversation. It's easier for me to resist if you've just told me what to do. Yes.
And it's a lot like coaching, isn't it? Like,
yes, absolutely. Yes, that's why we, and I'm sure Rachel, everybody on this call, I'm pretty sure you will agree that coaching is a leadership skill, right? So as a leader, there are moments where I manage and there are moments where I delegate. There are moments when I direct, seldom, but there are moments. And mostly I am coaching. I'm taking a coaching approach, which just means that I'm not so hooked on having all the answers myself, even though it might be easier to do it that way. So what we start to notice is high-performing teams move beyond the individuals and their interactions to focusing on the system itself. And there is some magic that happens when we start to do that. So how do we do that? Every team has a voice of its own. Every entity has got its own unique voice, and it is spoken through the members of the system. So let's say we all belong to a system. We ask a question. One person says yes, one person says no. Both of those voices belong to the system. They also belong to the individual, but they belong to the system. So what we want to do is we don't want to shut down any of the voices that we hear, even when they are displayed in an unskillful manner. You know, sometimes people are rude or blunt or abrupt. So what do? We want to shut it down, marginalize it, or try and convince it to come over to our side. But when we do that, we miss the wisdom that lives in that voice. So, of course, we want to re-educate if bacteria, it's a long day. It's been a long day. If behavior is unskillful, we want to re-educate, right? So that people are not rude and that we can listen to each other. But we don't want to shut down those voices. We want to listen to all voices, right? Think about your teams. What happens if the majority feel one way on a topic, and then there's one or two who feel a very different way? What does your team want to do? Do you want to be curious and listen? Or are you more likely to make those little voices wrong or try and convince them to come over to your side? What do you guys do?
Hi. Sometimes they overpower even the few voices which are against the rest of them. Sometimes in a group coaching it does happen. In a system and in a group it does happen.
Yes.
And they mow down and then they don't then speak up.
That's right. That's traditional, right? That's what usually happens, right?
Yes, you're right.
Yes. When we do that, though, we lose the wisdom in that voice. Think about in a change initiative, you know, that everybody's excited about the change and we're about to run out. And then there's that one voice, no, but. And everybody is like, oh.
We need a devil's advocate as well. We
Of
need,
course.
yeah.
That no but voice might just save you from throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? Even though we don't want to hear it. So when we leverage relationship systems intelligence, we listen to all voices and we engage with all voices. We make sure that we're looking for a win-win so that we are inclusive and we don't shut anybody down. We also look for ways to allow the system to reveal itself and leverage that information. So the system is always revealing itself. It reveals itself in, for example, the way that we work. We look for ways to create team. We look for ways that the team can come together to talk about itself. We look for ways for the team to come together to be playful. So their identity as a team starts to reveal itself. And then the team can talk about itself in that way, right? Oh, we're such a crazy team. Oh my goodness, we are so outrageous, right? Or, you know, start to talk about yourselves in that way and it starts to feed the system. It starts to feed the individuals in the system. Another way to leverage relationship systems intelligence, or RSI as we call it, is to trust and allow leadership to be a role that belongs to the system. Let's talk about that a little bit, because sometimes that sentence is a little bit triggering, particularly to very strong leaders. So let's talk first of all about roles. Whenever a team or a system comes together, there are roles that get created for the functions to occur. So those are like job descriptions, right? So in a family, someone has to cook, someone has to drive, someone has to take the kids to work, somebody has to do the laundry, somebody has to earn the money. These are job descriptions. In the team, someone is HR, someone is CEO, someone is finance. These are the job descriptions that are necessary so that the team or the system is functioning very, very well. But there are other types of roles that belong to the system. These are what we call internal roles. And an internal role is, for example, the challenger or the peacemaker or the troublemaker or the nurturer or the one who creates the fun. What are some inner roles that you can think of? not the job description roles, but these more inner roles.
The ideator, the implementer.
Yes, you get
The
these people who
connector.
are always great ideas, and then you get the one who really likes to implement, just talk about ideas. Yes. What else?
I said the connector.
The connector. Yes. I envy those kind of people. They do such a good job. They're always connecting people and bringing people together. So good they are at that. Now, both the outer roles and the inner roles belong to the system. But we as humans, we pick a role up because we see ourselves as that role, and then we identify with that role. So, for example, maybe because I am always, I'm Italian, I'm outspoken, I seem to always be the role of the challenger. So people start to see me, oh, Linda is so challenging. They collapse me and the role together. This is quite common. But in a skillful team, we would be able to put down the roles and for those roles to belong to the system. Let me give you an example of that. I once worked with a team. I worked with them for many, many years and different iterations of that team. And so there was one of the team members. She was always the social affairs type of, she picked up that role in her peers team. What that meant was, because they were a regional team, whenever they came together, she was always organizing the dinners and the drinks and the activities. And as she grew as a leader, she no longer wanted that role. So one day she announced that to her peers. She said, that's it, I'm done. I'm no longer going to be the Ministry of Social Affairs. I'm putting that role down. And her peers were shocked, and they almost were upset with her, thinking, well, if she doesn't do it, who's going to do it? But the truth is, anybody can step into any role. And in skillful teams, they will rotate the roles and populate the roles consciously and intentionally. So if I have the role of the challenger, it doesn't have to be me stepping into that all the time. It can be you. It can be Ritu. It can be Arvind or Sunita. Any one of us in any one meeting can step into the challenger role, right? Because it belongs to the system. And then when you're done, you put it down, and next time somebody else can step in. The leadership role is the same. Now, we're not talking about the hierarchical role, right? So teams come together, there is a hierarchy. Very often there's a hierarchy, and the leadership role sits at the top of that. We're not talking about that. But leadership is a role that belongs to the system, the inner role of the leader. Anybody can step into that role. And for example, we could say, oh, we could all be complaining, oh, it's cold, it's in the room, it's so cold, the air conditioning is so cold. And someone steps up and says, oh, let me change that. That initiative is leadership initiative, right? Or two of us could get stuck in a conversation. Maybe the conversation is not being very skillful. Maybe we're becoming a little bit toxic. Anybody around us from the other teammates can say, guys, this is not going very well. Why don't we just take a time out? That is a leadership role. That it doesn't need the team leader to say that, right? The problem is that we collapse the roles with the person. I'll give you an example in my own family. I remember my sister and her husband always bickering because she always did the cooking and she was sick of always doing the cooking. So the times where he said, okay, I'll do the cooking, he would do the cooking, but she was in the kitchen. No, don't do that. Don't do that. And why are you leaving such a mess? And why are you doing that? So eventually he walked out. He said, I cannot. So she is not letting go of the role so that he can pick it up and he can then live it in his way. There is sometimes an attachment to a role, right? So in skillful systems, skillful teams, roles get passed between us. How is that landing? Any questions around that? And if there are questions in the chat, I wonder if somebody could read them to me, please.
Yeah, Linda, there is one question in the chat.
Thank you.
Questions from Daisy, and she says, how do you see the roles in self-managed teams?
Perfect example of skillful distribution of roles, right? So there's no formal role that's been allocated to any one person. They will pick up the roles as and when they are needed, right? And then if the roles are no longer needed, they'll put them down and then they will create new roles. For example, what that might look like is, well, have you ever had the experience where in one group of friends, you are hilarious? You are the joker, you are hilarious. Everybody sees you as that. And whenever you come to that group, they say, oh, here, you're so funny. Oh my God, you're so funny. You go to another group of people and your jokes just fall flat. Like there's no hilarity, there's no humor, nothing, right? The role of the, what would you call that? The fun maker or the funny one is clearly not needed in that role, in that other system, right? So roles belong to the system, and the system will use them, or they will emerge as and when they are needed. So a organizing team will create roles as and when they're needed. And then once they are no longer needed, they will put them down. And then the next iteration will emerge. Does that answer your question?
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Can I ask a question now, or is it later?
No, please do.
I mean, I totally agree with you, and I totally understand the concept. However, my issue, or where I still struggling to find a solution, is when people are not mature enough to take charge for their role, whereby they know definitely that it's needed and they can do it, but they have no maturity enough to trust themselves or to speak up, or to, but they know that they can do it and they know that it's needed, but they don't have the courage to do it. I mean, within a team, how can you facilitate that or empower these people to do that? Step up.
Yes. I love that you're asking about empowerment, because in very hierarchical cultures, cultures, either company culture that's very hierarchical, or nationality culture that's very hierarchical, we are used to being told what to do, right? We are not really used to taking self-accountability, speaking up, making suggestions, but rather when we do that, it's more with our peers and certainly not up, right? To flatten the culture means to take away that, bless you, that dominant leadership role, not to take away, but to just change the nature of it. It means that you have to make it safe for people to express their views. But it's not going to happen straight away, because if I'm not used to speaking up or asking for what I need, very often what will happen is I freeze. I don't know what to do. You're giving me all the freedom. You think that you're doing well. You're giving me all the freedom. You're saying, don't worry, you can speak up. Please come with your ideas. But the impact on me is I freeze. Plus, if there's more honor shame, a little bit of honor shame in my own culture, I'm frozen. I don't know what to do, and I don't speak up because I don't want to embarrass myself. Does that kind of resonate?
Yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing is also cultural binded, because sometimes when you speak up or when you take one role, internal role, let's say, you are kind of stepping on a foot of another, the hierarchy again. So you kind of speaking ideas that the manager himself or the leader who should come up with the ideas did not do that. And therefore there is a kind of sensitivity, if you know what I mean.
That's
So
right.
that's another issue as well. I don't know. It's not about it's just questions that pop in my head, and I thought maybe I could share it with
No,
you.
I like that you're looking there, because those are some of the dynamics that are at play in the teams that we're working with, right? And that was that hierarchical piece. We call that power fear. So power executed well is like a soothing balm because it's life affirming. But power done unskillfully, or, unskillfully, let's put it that way, is going to shut down and sometimes destroy systems. They fear speaking up. So as a leader, if you want a team to speak up, even when they've had that, you have to find ways that allow people to feel empowered, that they feel empowered, that they are doing the right things, and you support them. And sometimes it's about micromanaging in the beginning and clearly saying you do 1, 2, 3, and then asking them slowly, what do you think about that? What is your opinion about that? And slowly making it safe for them to then share their opinions and their thoughts and their ideas.
Linda,
Raghu,
can I add something here?
there's a hand up here.
Yeah.
Yes, and then Vikram.
Vikram, before that, I think Rajeshwari had her hand up first, so maybe we
That's
should.
right.
No problem. I'll hold on.
I love the questions. Keep them coming. There was a lady with a hand up. Yes.
Rajeshwari.
I think Vikram can go. I'll answer. I mean, I'll take up the question later in case it's linked to this particular topic, Rachel.
Fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to share that it's a fear of failure also sometimes which makes people shut their mouth and then keep quiet because they don't know. They might be looking at the others and then they feel that, oh, if I may go wrong, then I may have my way. So sometimes this also keeps people looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I thought I should add to that if it's okay.
Absolutely. So it's true. When there is a fear of failure, if I fear failing because it might impact my job or my performance management rating or how people perceive me, I will not take risks. I will not stick my neck out. In our team, we have great examples about that, right? Because we take lots of risks and we bite off lots more than what we can chew. Sometimes we make mistakes, and I can tell you, I barely ever have to go back and look at my team and say, because they hold themselves so accountable, and we all know that it's okay to make a mistake, but don't do it twice. So we feel safe to make mistakes, which means that we're always trying new things. But a very hierarchical leader, very often they want to hold on to power. And so they don't make it safe for the subordinates to take risks. But you can't hold.
Thank you so much, Linda. Please.
You can't hold creativity and fear in the same breath, right?
I agree.
Yeah. Raghu, thank you for your patience.
Oh, hi, Linda. Good morning to you.
Hi.
Linda, I was just wondering, how would you relate disengagement when you're coaching for Team for Success, right? It's easy to assume that the person is not unable to speak or not kind of putting up their hands. Could be fear of failure, or it could be assumptions, right? But predominantly they could be disengaged, right? How do you kind of bring that up when you're coaching for team success? There are easily great data points, right? Not all people are engaged, right? There's far more disengaged people than engaged. And that becomes a challenge for leader. So I just wanted to get your thoughts around Linda.
There are several different ways. Very often when I'm coaching a team, I'm using tools that require the team members to stand up and move around the room. So even though they may not be speaking with their body, they are demonstrating how they feel. Because, I'm asking, it's a facilitated exercise where I'm asking questions and they have to move their body in relationship to how they feel. But also get curious about what's in the silence. Rather than judging it to be disengagement, Get curious. I notice you're silent. Or I notice you haven't spoken today. What's in your silence? And then as a coach, learning to be comfortable in the silence. Wait to hear the answer. Sometimes that's the hardest thing for us. And I promise you, if you just wait in silence, somebody will speak eventually because they don't like the silence. They feel uncomfortable in the silence. Where I'd like to point you is sometimes we look at somebody who's not speaking and we interpret that as disengagement. But who knows what it is? Right. I had a real good example of that the other day. I was coaching a team and one gentleman was on his phone. He kept going in and out, in and out, in and out of the room. And the rest of the team, they were very engaged, very together, but he kept hanging back on his phone. And I said to the key stakeholder, I said, you know, I think the coaching was a great success. I'm just really curious what happened to that gentleman. He seemed disengaged. He said to me, Linda, he came in and he told us from the morning his little 3-year-old boy had locked himself in the bathroom. So, I mean, as a parent, when your 3-year-old child has locked itself in the bathroom, how can you possibly engage, right? They had to call the fire brigade to break down the bathroom door, and it was a whole drama. So you never know what's happening in the background of people's minds. So get curious.
Yeah, got it. So your way of what you're suggesting is perhaps being curious is the way to deal with it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
From a team perspective, you might hear some really useful information because remember, the disengaged voice is a voice of the system. It's a puzzle piece. And so they might say, you know, I'm disengaged because none of this applies to me. Or it's all great that we're coaching, but this doesn't mean anything when we go back to the workplace.
Got it. Brilliant. Thank you, Linda.
Pleasure. Who's next? Rajeshwari.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. So I had a question about the internal roles, right? So as an individual, don't I have an innate preference or a tendency for specific roles, right? Like challenger or creator, not so much for implementer or something like that. So when you say that anybody can step into any role, I'm just curious about that, and I'm thinking that wouldn't behavioral flexibility of the team also kind of play an important part in, the overall effectiveness and success of the team, and their ability to play multiple roles?
That you've hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. So the more adept a team is at sharing the roles, the more skillful it becomes. And I'll give you an example. Just last week, my team, it's the end of the year. I think this is not unusual. Most teams sit and do their strategy for the next year. We spent 2.5 days on our strategy last year. And 2024 strategy last week. As a team, one of the first things we do is we talk about how do we as a team want to be together in the next 2.5 days? Like, what's the atmosphere we want to create? How do we want to behave? How will we behave when it's difficult? And then we asked ourselves roles. What roles? Who will step into the what role? And because I'm the leader of the team, I said, I'm not driving. I'm putting the driver role down. And if I don't step into the driver role, eventually someone has to pick it up because we have to move forward, right? So you can do that skillfully, consciously, and intentionally, or it can be just by chance. Because if I stop cooking, somebody's going to be hungry and eventually somebody's going to cook. Whether it's good or bad, we don't know, but somebody will step in.
Yeah, like they say, nature doesn't like vacuum, right? Yeah.
That's right. So
Thanks, Linda, that helps.
Yeah, so rather be conscious and intentional about it. So Neil, can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I had an extension to Raghu's question. If there is someone who's explicit with his or her disengagement, says like, there's no point. These meetings happen, but it doesn't add any value at the base end. So if someone is kind of explicit when you approach them on a one-on-one, have you had that kind of an experience where someone's disengaged with an intention, not because there's the problem, just because speaking up doesn't help here? These meetings happen and then we go back to our normal. They don't believe in the team process. Have you had that kind of a thing, and what have you done about it in your team coaching experience?
Sure. Every team I start working with has an element of that in it. I speak directly to it. I'm like, so help me understand what that means to you. Help me understand what's led you to believe that nothing will change in the future. Or, I really engage with the voice and I'm curious. I also like to make people like that feel heard and understood, because very often they are the ones that have tried to speak up a lot, and now they feel they've not been heard, or they've not been engaged with, or they've been shut down and marginalized. And so that's why they feel things are hopeless. Nothing's going to change. So making somebody feel heard and understood is what might just bring them on board. I had a team member actually last week say to me, I was teaching them COIN, which is a model to give feedback, and I was also giving them a model to listen to each other. And he pulled all the way back. Now, he had been participative throughout the coaching. So I got curious. I said, I feel like your energy has been pulled back. What's happening? He says, yeah, I think you're trying too hard. I think you're looking for problems. We're fine. You're looking for problems, and you're looking for problems to try and fit your model in the construct so that you can tick that you've trained us on that. So I said, oh, okay. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that with me, right? And would you mind if I use the model on you in this moment? And when I did that, because the model is very powerful, he felt heard and seen and understood and felt it was authentic. And honestly, just because I engaged with what he was saying a little, he was the biggest champion throughout the workshop. Sometimes people just want to feel heard and seen.
Sure. Thank you, Linda.
Pleasure. Arvind?
Yeah, so Linda, hi.
Hi.
This is a reference to the point you were making that every team member must rotate, and some of us, and Rajeshwari mentioned that some of us are naturally better at something. Sometimes if you do that, won't the sum of parts become a little less, because the person who switches the role may not be the best at it? That's the first point. And so people get pushed to doing a role that everybody believes that they do the best. So you kind of get a little stereotyped into, you want this person to be X and this person to be Y. Right. And it's good for everybody to, of course, do it. And there are some mature teams who are okay with it, because they want everybody to be trained in different roles so that they are eventually a better team. But that that does have a hit in the short run for some kind of performance which may not be the best. Any thoughts on that? That's the first question. And I'll ask you. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for asking one at a time. So we're talking about the outer role now, right? You're talking about job description type of roles. Yes. So.
No, I'm talking about the internal roles. I mean, the challenger roles, and I don't know whether that's out or that's the inner role, right?
Those are inner roles, yes.
Yes. Yeah. So the challenger roles or the roles where a person is is a devil's advocate, etc. Some of us are naturally like that. Yeah. So and if you're working in a team for a longer period of time, you recognize somebody is very good at ideas. And they will say, oh, we're stuck. Okay, X, Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, can you give us something new? Yeah. Or what do you think? And so on and so forth. So we get typecast because for the sake of the team, for the sake of better performance,
Yeah. So we pick up roles because we identify very closely with them. You're right. So there's something in me that makes me the challenger role, that I step into that very easily. If it's working for the team, there's no need to mess it up, right? When someone starts to complain, I don't want to be the one who initiates. I don't want to be the one who always thinks about the solutions. I don't want to be the timekeeper or the driver. I just want to be the peaceful one. When there is what we say role nausea, or you know, those kind of things, that's the moment where we can say, okay, let's relook at the roles, right? So you've been the role of the challenger. Let's put it down and let's see how to populate it more skillfully, right? Because sometimes the role gets picked up. Let's talk, maybe the timekeeper role gets picked up by someone who's hopeless at keeping time because they're so busy, but they're doing it because it's needed, but it's not necessarily their strength or their like, right? So we would put it down, and then we would design with the team, how do we want to populate the role? I say, let me go back to the role of this is an outer role, but it's a good way to explain it. So with my sister, who was complaining, she had role nausea about being the one who was always cooking, right? But when her husband picked it up, she wouldn't let it go. So there was a need to put the role down and then redesign it consciously. So, okay, so if Lara is not cooking, then he can step in, but what must that look like? So Lara said, I want you to remember that I don't eat meat and I'm a vegetarian and I like to eat healthy. So we can't just order takeaways, right? So there's a need then to redesign it. And when they can do that skillfully and consciously, that's when it starts to work.
Thank you so much. Daisy just points out one more thing, that you can also find hidden talent by changing roles. So that's an addition to your point. And I take your point if there is role nausea. And that's a very nice way to put it, and a very nice trigger to decide whether to rotate or not rotate. My second question is exactly the point that you were making about the cooking example, where somebody is getting feedback and it really tells me that this person doesn't know herself as well. So here is another person who's saying, okay, I'm here to cook, but you are not allowing me. You're just all over the place. So here is the feedback that comes to a person. For a lot of people in cultures like the Asian cultures, teams from various places where there is no real a reporting relationship. You will get feedback which kind of forces people to question their own meaning. I mean, suddenly somebody is saying you're very aggressive, or you're extremely, you're not allowing us to speak, and so on and so forth. How do you manage it? How does one manage it in a team coaching situation? Do you step aside and do a side coaching session with this person to handle this particular issue if it's big enough? Or
you mean the person? Do you mean the person giving the feedback or the person receiving the feedback?
If the person receiving the feedback and everybody seems to be giving the same feedback, obviously that person needs to do something about it because it's not working. And sometimes it's not easy for people to change just because they happen to come into a team meeting, and they may not be working in a team always. They may have a separate role, and this team may be just a 30% job or a 20% job. So how do you, in your experience, handle something like this? Do you go separately for a coaching session with this person, or feedback, or force that person to introspect, or coach that person to introspect? How does it work?
So, I mean, there might be a need for executive coaching, for example, on the side, but traditionally, when you take a systemic approach to coaching, all behavior belongs to the system. Good behavior, bad behavior, skillful behavior, unskillful behavior. So rather than putting the spotlight on one individual, I would, if some people were giving feedback, I would take it back to the system. I'd say, oh, wow. So there is a need here for X, Y, Z behavior to change. As a team, how do we want to be with that? You know, and you really want to listen to everybody's points of view, but maybe there's also need for alignment coaching between them. So it's not about my way or your way. It's about how do we truly listen to each other, empathetically understand each other, and then as a aligned team, how do we find a solution moving forward that is encompassing of everything that's needed? You might say to me, no, the team might reflect to me, Linda, there's a need for you to cook. And then I might say, I hate cooking. So you can't make me cook. I hate cooking. So as a team coach, what you want to do is create a solution that allows the person who doesn't like cooking and the need for cooking in the team to come together, and another solution emerges so that both of these needs are met. Now, how you would do that is by listening to what emerges in the system, because the system is always emerging. There's always an emergence piece, and rather than resisting it or trying to force it on someone, get curious about that and ask the system what it thinks. They have all the solutions they need.
Thank you.
Yeah. My pleasure. The skill that I would use as a leader is the deep democracy. Now, deep democracy is not voting. Deep democracy is the belief that every voice in the system has the right to speak and be heard. Now, I might not do anything with every voice that speaks, but when you speak, you have the right to be heard. And if as a leader or as a coach, we listen to all the voices in the system, you start to see that the solutions live in there, in those voices, right? Now, if I move down the slide, creating a culture of positivity where people feel all the things that we mentioned before, positive about each other, we trust each other, we feel safe, we collaborate, we have skillful conflict, we hold each other accountable. When you have those type of positive behaviors, team members then become more productive. Everything we've talked about is in service of creating a we-centered culture, right? So it's not me or you, it's really focusing on the we.
Linda, before we move ahead, Shilpa had a question around role nausea. So I just want to check with her, is that question answered, or is there something more that you needed?
No, I think it was answered very well in our discussion, and Linda did it beautifully. When she spoke about that example of the lady not willing to cook and yet kind of still jumping in the kitchen and helping. So thank you.
Thank you. So teams evolve when they feel free to engage in positive conflict without fear. So they've learned how to be skillful. They've minimized toxic behaviors. Oh, we could do a whole webinar on toxic communication. They've learned to minimize things like criticism and blame, defensiveness, passive aggressive, stonewalling, disengagement, and contempt. And when they can have a conflict in a way that's not hurtful, now they do it without fear, because they know that if you don't have conflict, it breaks trust. If you stay and work through it, it builds trust. So teams evolve when they feel free to discuss failures and learn from their mistakes. When they consciously focus on creating positivity, there is that magical ratio of 5-to-1 that John Gottman talks about in his book, but also Gary Chapman, 5 love languages, Gary Chapman. They both say that for every 1 negative interaction, we should focus on 5 positive interactions, so that, well, it's almost like you make a deposit in the emotional bank account. And so think for yourself, right? If you and I feel positive about each other, we love each other, we do nice things for each other, we're thoughtful, we support each other, when there is one negative interaction, it has less of an impact than if our emotional bank account is very skinny. If there's not much positivity, when there's one withdrawal, it will have a much bigger impact. The best teams are, even during times of conflict, they're open to hearing each other and championing each other's point of view. So even though I might not agree with you, when you speak, I think, oh, I can really understand why you say that. Yeah, I can align with you on this, but this is where I see it totally differently. And then we work through conflict in that way. Because just because I don't agree with your point of view doesn't mean I can't understand why you feel a certain way, right? So teams evolve when the roles belong to the system and the leadership role is shared. We're not talking about the hierarchical job description role, but the inner role of the leader is shared. And when teams move away from me and you to focusing on the we, what do we as a team need? What will make us flourish? How do we want to be together in times of conflict or challenge? So they move away from expectations and move towards creating agreements, behavioral contracts that they can all align to. Then they start to create the we, and they implement structures where they continuously are checking into their team charters and their behavioral contracts so that they can continuously reevaluate how are they doing as a team. How are we doing this week? How did we communicate together? How did we work through that challenging situation? Like, did we do well? Were we duds? Or did we do okay, but there's still room for improvement? Right? And they have those conversations every week. What you look at is what you get. Teams know that they have to look at their goals and their KPIs. And what they have to learn is to put the same focus on their team dynamics so that they can succeed. So, some outcomes of team coaching is that all of a sudden now there is more cohesiveness. The love between them is increased. The understanding between them is increased. Collaboration is increased. Trust and positivity increases. We have a decrease in silos. They become happier in times of change because they feel united and they're going through it together. They are better able to take self-accountability and hold each other accountable for behavior and performance, right? So it's not a policing exercise, but they feel comfortable to say, gosh, you're normally so quick to respond. I noticed that hasn't happened this week. Is everything okay? Can I help you with something? Right? You're not your usual self. Can I help you? And they improve the communication in the team so that they can engage in respectful cross-cultural communication that doesn't shy away from healthy conflict and debate. Right? I know you guys like statistics and data, so this is a slide. I'm more than happy to share these slides with you if you would like. There are some statistics. This came off the coaching website, but many years ago. So probably these have increased now, but they're great. It's great data to see the statistics that support coaching. And feel free to take photos of these slides.
So Daisy's asking, do you have a source for these numbers?
They were from the ICF website a couple of years ago. This was maybe 2020, around COVID or just after COVID. It was a report that came out around that time.
So, Linda, if I may ask a question here, the journey from I to we is something that's a long drawn journey, yes, where all participants grow in terms of their awareness of how they can contribute to each other.
Yes.
And how working together actually brings in the efficiencies that they're all looking for. In this journey, shouldn't there be a role for reflection and feedback mechanisms built in for the teams to, sort of start grappling with what are the kind of friction points emerging and where the alignment needs to be improved or ironed out?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So if I were in front of you, I could, on a flip chart, I could draw a little, very often it's a diagram that I ask the teams when I first start coaching with them. So think about high-performing teams. What are the activities that high-performing teams do? And very often teams say they meet KPIs, they project manage, they fulfill roles, they achieve objectives, they have great strategy, they practice the behaviors, they do all of those kind of activities. And I always say to them, yes. So those are task or productivity related activities. And the more you link those to your KPIs and to standard measure of those, and the more those will get done. And we know that teams look at their goals, look at their KPIs, they work to achieve them. They also stop and pause and reflect on how did they do in their performance. Now we also look at high-performing teams, which we know consciously and intentionally focus on their relationship, which we call positivity. So things like meeting, reflecting, giving each other feedback, celebrating, over communicating, listening to each other, championing each other, having productive conflict, going and doing social activities together. High-performing teams focus as much on these things as they do the productivity things, because they know that by focusing up here, it's the oil that smooths the way for productivity to happen. So unless you are reflecting, first of all, setting behavioral contracts or team charters, and then making time to reflect and talk about the behavior, you won't get an improved behavior. So in our opinion, in our team, we do this weekly. But some teams initially, when they're learning, they think, oh, let's do it once a month. Eventually, you start to realize that, it's just good practice to set 30 minutes every week aside to say, gosh, last week was rough. How did we do? How are you all feeling? Like, I know that I lost my cool. What was the impact of that? What could I have done differently? And then we give each other feedback, and we're open to listening to that. Then you start to create we-centered cultures that move productivity forward. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
So you're absolutely right. So it becomes, in the end, a new way of working, right? So if we think about the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the amount of change, the fact that teams are spread across the globe and change is happening so quickly. This is why there is a need for a new way of working. And the new way of working is to take a systemic approach. I have 10 minutes, but I wanted to check in with you first. Either we can open the floor to more questions. I'll do that with pleasure. But I worked with a bank a few years ago, and because they are a bank, they attached a dollar value to the impact. They were a leadership team in a bank. So they attached a dollar value to the impact of coaching that leadership team on the organization. So what would you prefer we do? We can look at the impact of ROI, or we can open it up for questions. What would you like?
Impact on ROI.
Yes. Okay. Is that okay? We can take 5 minutes and 5 minutes. All right. So they were a leadership team of a local UAE bank. I'm based here in Dubai. They were highly committed to the development through team coaching. It was not supposed to be a team coaching, a 2-year coaching program, but it stretched out to 2 years. This team was highly committed. So I would meet them once every 2 months, once every quarter. And in between, they really honored the agreements they made in the team coaching. They went back and they really honored those. So they really worked on themselves. They were a group of talented individuals, and they were not as high performing that they wanted to be. They spoke openly as a team, but they did not deal with conflict one-on-one. They were about to face stressful market conditions. So they knew that the market was about to change. Never in their wildest dreams did they imagine COVID coming on board, but they knew that there were going to be market conditions that were changing. When I assessed them, just to give you an example, when I assessed them, before speaking, they would all look at the leader. These were the leadership team of a bank, so really senior people, but nobody would speak unless he either nodded or spoke. And so that was really insightful, right? So we used a tool called Team Diagnostics. You might know the tool. The Team Diagnostics measures positivity and productivity, and the positivity ratings are based on optimism, communication, camaraderie, diversity, respect, trust, and constructive interaction, meaning we can have conflict together. And you can see the light blue was the beginning, the dark blue is the end, how much they grew in the positivity, right? Trust grew a whopping 46%. On the productivity, so our ability to set goals and strategies, to have the leadership role in the team, to be proactive, resourceful, accountable, aligned, and to be able to make decisions together and then follow those through. Look at how much they grew, light green to dark green. Alignment grew by 34%. Super interesting. Only because of the team coaching where we talked about their dynamics. We worked through conflict, all sorts of things. So let's look at the top 3 increases for productivity, alignment, the ability to make decisions together, and to lead as a team. Those were the top increases. The top productivity. The top positivity were trust, constructive interaction, so our ability to have productive conflict, and respect and communication grew. The top overall 2 were trust, 3, trust, constructive interaction, and alignment. That's exciting, right? When we asked them in the beginning of the journey, what are your top 3 strengths? They said, we're seasoned professionals, we're individually motivated, we're results oriented. When we asked them what their top 3 challenges were, we lack levels of trust, we need more collaboration, there needs to be more alignment around the strategy. And what they said is a non-negotiable for high-performing team: complete trust and respect, open communication, and alignment on goals. When we asked them those 3 questions the same again, they said that their strengths were that they had mutual respect, they were cohesive yet diverse, they were results-oriented. Their challenges were to cascade the culture down the line, to get the best out of employees, and to achieve targets under tough conditions. And they still wanted to continue to challenge each other more, further nurture the team, and remain aligned. Now, When we talked about measures of success in the beginning, yes, the team diagnostics was one way, but we also hooked into their internal employee engagement scores and their leadership 360s and things like that. So they were able to hook in and get data from that. Business indicators, so employee engagement score went up by 10 points. Customer satisfaction, as a result of that, customer satisfaction score went up. Employee productivity went up. And the human capital ROI went up. Or down, meaning they did not have so much turnover. So people stayed longer. What's that like to see that?
So, Linda, I'm wondering, as I'm looking at these numbers, and I'm just anticipating how some of my clients would respond. How did you draw that, that connection that this is a result of team coaching? Because, your employee engagement scores could also depend on, some other initiatives that are happening in the organization, or even for that matter, the turnover.
Yeah. So as a team coach, I never promise ROI, because how do you measure that, right? But I do promise return on effectiveness. So you will be able to have meetings, more effective meetings, where you work through your entire agenda, less conflict, more constructive conversations. Those are the things that we can kind of commit to. They did this internally. They had their internal assessments and questionnaires, and so they calculated this internally. Because they're a bank. So they keep track of these numbers. Yeah.
Linda?
Yes.
I love the way you presented not only current data, past data, internal data, and different data. They're just connecting the dots, and it's for them to believe or not believe it.
Yes. It's for them to believe. Exactly. Any other questions?
Did I have a question in the chat window? Want to know, in this case study, how long was your intervention and what were the phases, if you may kind of describe it?
What were the phases? So the interaction was 2 year. It was a 2-year process. Normally, I have a very, very clear structure. Once the contract is signed, I spend some time assessing the system, and I do that in several ways. In this case, I met with the entire team on a 2-hour team assessment. I like the Pat Lancioni team assessment, but we also did this team diagnostics, right? That gave us a lot of data, and then we built the coaching around the data. Then I initially met with them every 8 weeks, and slowly that expanded. I would meet them in person for a day at a time. The first full immersion workshop was a 2-day workshop, and then the follow-up workshops were 1 day at a time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? My pleasure. Any other questions? Maybe there's some in the chat that I cannot see.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything else. We've addressed all the questions in chat as we went along.
Perfect.
I have one question. How were you able to differentiate between, while working with this bank, how were you able to differentiate between the coaching and mentoring aspect of this line?
For me, I'm very clear. When I am mentoring, I am the subject matter specialist, and I might use coaching skills, but I share my experience, and I ask my mentee, how would that resonate for them and how would that work for them? When I am coaching, it's not about me, it's about my clients. I might have an intuition that I ask if I can share my intuition, but it's really about them. And I trust that they are, that as a system, that they are generative and intelligent and they can come up with the answers. I just ask questions until the answers start to emerge without giving them advice or telling them what to do or anything like that. Whereas as a mentor, I might say, so in my experience, this and this and this is what's worked for me. You know. Any last questions before I close? I'm very aware of the time. I'm happy to hang out, but I want to respect everybody else's time. So to conclude, if we want the systemic approach to increasing team performance in a very bottom line way, accept that change is accelerating and that there is a different need in teams today than there was before. So leadership has to be different, has to evolve to become different. Also, when there is a lot of change, accept that if you trust that there is always something trying to happen for the team, even times of change, we start to work with what's emerging rather than resist it, right? And the way to do that is to tap into the inherent wisdom that lives in the team. We are much smarter together than we are as a bunch of individuals. And trust the team. Trust that I don't ever have to fix the team, advise the team, tell it what to do. I just have to be a coach, ask powerful questions, and let the questions emerge from the team itself. Because when we do that, number one, they're smart, they know exactly what to do, but they also own the solutions that they have come up with, and then they can own the journey that they're on. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you, everybody. It's been lovely being here with you. Are there any last questions?
Okay, so I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we've answered everything that people had to ask, but I feel free to connect with Linda. She is quite responsive, so you can connect with her on LinkedIn, look her up on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to her if you need more information about, ORSC or team coaching for that matter. And so with that, I think we will bring this to a close for the day because we are 3 or 4 minutes over the hour. So thank you, Linda, for taking the time. I know this is a very crazy time of the year for you. So
no, it was delightful being here. Thank all of you for being here, for giving me the honor of your time and for inviting us to speak to you. It's been lovely spending this time with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And so also, I'd like to know everybody who's joined. Thank you very much for your wonderful participation. I think it was a very interactive session because all of you, really participated and, showed up so in such an engaged way. So thank you for that. The session recording will go up on the IC YouTube channel in a couple of days, perhaps. And also, for those of you who've attended the entire session, you will get your CCU certificates in your email. So watch out for that. In case you do not get that, do feel free to message me or email me directly, and I'll take care of that. Yeah, but give it a week. You will get the certificates in about a week. So yeah. All right. Okay. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening ahead.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Happy to meet you all.